You ready?
Mm-hmm.
The act is the melodramatic narrative of torture. The presentation of pain in the 1AC is one that allows the audience to identify with the suffering of others and does exonerate themselves and overcome their guilt. The act story is one directed at the bystander, one that turns the object of torture into a collection of past pain to be overcome by sympathetic and empathetic identification. That's Meester 10. Here focus on the intense suppression act of torture, body and pain there. Traumatic suppression is the pain experience of the pain with the achievement of truth and the infliction of culture with evil and revealing the truth about pain, melodramatic forms that connect the partial victory over evil. Suffering is being the narrative through which the truth is told assumed. Melodramatic is a social melodramatic. Melodrama is meant to be read by people who may want to feel bad about the condition described, but who would be made highly uncomfortable if the victim were portrayed as blaming them. The melodramas an audience can understand themselves as bystanders who are capable of feeling compassion without fear. Physical pain is paradigm cases of adversity that can be put to the test. Imagination and memory can sometimes be used to an anesthetic to pain. Evoking physical pain is the clearest form of the social injury, thus becomes an ideological means to force the closure of social grievance by allowing those whose pain has stopped standing for a while. All who still suffer the consequence of all injustice that is past and present. And images of torture are paradigmatic image of trauma in human rights discourse. The empathetic identification with victims of torture creates a sentimental economy of empathy, which turns the tortured body into a pornographic object for consumption. That's Meester and 10. Trauma becomes a prototype of human rights discourse of being torture, but persists in the form of trauma. It still expresses the healing social narrative that I have described here. Physical torture appears to be the prototype of all injustice because the torture victims claim prototypical intense because as bodily pain can be described independently in this historical and cultural context as violation of human rights beyond the privileging of torture. In today's human rights discourse lies something pain is not only the sign visible across the hierarchy of social life, the most illusion that nation can be built through the channels of effective identification and empathy. This tactful use of trauma to describe effective social inequality over-identifies the eradication of pain with the achievement of social justice. Bodies and pain are only readable through the narrative and suspension that connect individual suffering to social justice. The victim's willingness to provide a graphic counts his own degradation as pornographic, and the act engages in an attempt to resurrect the humanity of suffering. The suffering violated body is essentially the human is a part and parcel of a human rights discourse. That's Meester 10. Politics of human rights presents itself as the natural transcendence of politics of revolution and counter-revolution that together produce the horrors of the 20th century. The present discourse of human rights attempts to move once divided society from moral psychology of a struggle to all one of reconciliation, the self-consciously ethical rejection of previous versions of human rights of man that were violating the power aristocracy and resistance. Human rights discourse operates today in the realm of intervention and rescue, recast the central sides of revolutionary political thought. The underlying hope of today's human rights discourse that the victims of past evil will not struggle against its ongoing beneficiary after the evildoers are gone, and their description of human rights abuses is an imperialistic attempt to create Western sentimentalism. This only ends up reproducing violence through voyeurism. That's 10. Human rights enables a contemporary form of imperial intervention to impose its values and views on the global south. Representational practices of human rights and some of the hyper-visible figures through which the privileged work to affirm imperial intervention. Systematic trauma effects will lend themselves more easily to the terms of human rights. Institutional mechanisms that root human rights emerge from social movements that namely describe violation, gather information, develop presentations that generate public outrage, gather supporters, build organizations, and press for human rights and include the violation of tradition that images humanity by cultivating effective identification, problematizing the sentiment-based ethics and compassionate ethos that centers human rights in the suffering body. The visual field of human rights established normative frames that shape the process of legal recognition. Sentimentalism is visually staged to make recognizable certain figures of human rights, selective visibility, recursive, rhetorical marks of human rights narrative. Trauma, suffering, and witness spectacle thus becomes reproducing violence through voyeurism. The rhetorical strategies of human rights depend on troubling dichotomies of vector and witness. This definition ties agency to a trajectory that moves progressively from victimization to naming, identification to the self, representation and expression. Trajectory brings human rights narratives coming of age stories that both emphasize and pathologize victims, and human rights discourse has no grasp of the good. It is motivated by staving off evil. Human rights is motivated by the banishment of others to the realm of evil and inhumanity. The humanitarian will against all evil is mirrored in the imperial logic and resultant war. That's Meester 10. Commitment to human rights is the avoidance of evil rather than the vision of good standing. The denunciation of physical atrocities thus becoming an essential element of what it means to be human. The foundational premise of human rights advocacy seeks to address the perpetration of atrocities. They had already placed themselves in the category of the human and now in embracing both capitalism and humanitarianism, and this process of appropriation through empathetic identification with the other is the root cause of colonial violence, as Waldorf 95. Western thought characterized the process of appropriation and domination based on possessive individualism, egocentric, reduced the alien to the own. The other appears as my double or extension of the own. The method presupposes that I have something of my own that I can put into the other soul of mine, or other soul or mind. This centers on reducing the alien to the common. What does not fit into the scheme becomes marginalized and eliminated. Colonization with such idea of propagating the appropriation of the world. I need another card to the the other is simply an object of research, distancing, excluding them from the active role in empowerment. That's Pierce 08. The idea of producing knowledge with the research attempting to generate knowledge about social systems while attempting to change it is the right possible for poor marginalized people to conduct their own analysis and take action. Research contribute not only to the content of the research, i.e. the activity that is being researched, but also the creative thinking that generates images and draws conclusions from the research. Truth brings in the qualities of relationships, building with the research and deeper engagement with, rather than distance from the object of knowledge. Change methodologies which do not aim to give the observer role in the research process. The principle of participatory research is that become agents rather than objects of research, and the introduction of the affirmative politics to the institution of debate operates through guilt aspersion, which legitimizes the oppressive institution that creates a circular form of egoist politics, which exploits privilege while claiming the status of liberal ally. This mode of commodification prevents liberation. That's Nair 13. Remember the criticism of the precarious bunch of non-conformists and do-gooders, liberal leftists, the people who claim that they too feel the oppression just as actually want to remain in the good books of both the black and white worlds, want to shy away from all forms of extremism, giving white supremacy as being just as bad as black power. They facilitate between the two worlds, verbalizing all the complaints of the black beautiful while skillfully extracting what suits them from the exclusive pool of white privilege. They call a few intelligent, articulate blacks to come round for tea at home, where all presidents ask each other the same old hacking question: how can we bring about change? The more such tea parties will cause the freer they shall feel from the guilt that harness their conscience to keep the group going. The question to what extent while we beautifully verbalize the suffering of the other, institutional survival, our material rights, our livelihood are all structurally implicated with the global coloniality and its exploitation of others. From this recognition of ontological, even if not epistemic complicity, the implication of the challenge is more significant. The place of our fight is within our societies, within which we are ourselves both oppressed and oppressors, and witnessing allows the bystander to imagine a completion to traumatic history. However, the identification is not a compassionate engagement, but a way to stage guilt by assuming an active engagement, which is nothing other than passive recollection. Dead Meester 10 calls into question the fundamental mechanism of moral change on which human rights purpose to rely. The conversion from bystander to witness, compassionate witness, projection, actual victim feelings of unfulfillment that he already satisfies. The witness who provides narrative fulfillment of the victim's story by putting it in his own. Satisfy the witness provides narrative fulfillment to the victim's story by putting it in his own. Remember, past, but the witness real moral identification is not with an actual victim, but with a hypothetical other bystander who would have been an opponent by bearing and even another part witnessing. Time question of whether beneficiaries ought to feel guilty about whether they would have been perpetuators rather than just lucky to be beneficiaries. Do you have anything else? Yeah. I'm sorry.
What if you would seem to indicate that suffering is commodified and we're suffering from compassion, fatigue, and the status quo? The only thing we change is to tie that empathetic response to.
We say that you make suffering a spectacle.
Why do we make that worse?
We say that you make
Why
suffering a
isn't
spectacle.
suffering already a spectacle?
Suffering is a spectacle. And you use that spectacle to reinforce human rights, to reinforce humanism.
Why
You say
does
that's
it
problematic.
make things worse?
Well, because you use that spectacle to reinforce humanism and human life. We say that's problematic because that is the current justification for the violence that happens in society.
Okay, why are we human rights?
Is there an alternative?
It's a reject alternative.
Okay, so just, like, is this actually?
Yeah, we have a bunch of case terms who think that you should lose.
Why are we human rights discourse?
We can look closer to Acuja 11 evidence. You say that we need to take the depth of the status quo. We need to use that depth through spectacle to bring it towards a more human life. Your second example.
That is that we have to bring it towards a new world order, not human
Yes,
rights.
it says that we need to
It says we need to
use the media and war technologies that make the world a target to move towards a necropower where politics is therefore death that leads to human life.
Sure. Why is that human rights discourse?
I mean,
In the context of your Maillard 9 evidence that says that we need to read this in a larger context of, quote, human rights.
Okay. The white guilt link, why do we flip-flop between two worlds?
explain your question.
I am confused about why we link, or why we are trying to...
We see that you're implicated as the
Yeah, we say that you're implicated as the oppressor.
Sure, but...
Because of the
And
human
you say
rights.
that the human rights, along with you making the other a spectacle to be watched and then gazed at, is you flip.
Sure, I'm
Right, 'cause
confused about
the
why
suffering others-
is not already an evidence.
the
Wait,
suffering-
so why isn't it? What?
I'm confused about why your impacts don't link harder to the status quo than they
You
do.
are the status quo.
Why?
Because
We
of the links
we
that-
have just isolated links.
Sure, but in the
You
status
make
quo...
others a spectacle, you make their
In the
violence
status
a
quo,
spectacle. We say that
that's-
that's necessarily violent. We say that empathetic identification is
No,
necessarily
in the
why
status
the
quo-
impact of the 1AC happens. We say
Yeah,
that you perpetuate that same logic in the terms of your 1AC.
Sure, in the status quo, suffering is already a spectacle, which is
Yes,
what
and
you're
you
talking about.
further
My
that
question
spectacle,
is,
you do nothing. We say that that's bad, so we should reject you.
why does the 1AC do nothing?
Because the 1AC only recreates the logic of humanism that allows for the
Sure.
suffering to
I'm
happen in the first place.
confused how-
You say that in the
Oh,
status, your argument
We're
is,
case turning you.
Can you explain the root cause argument that
okay,
human rights is the root cause?
so your argument is that the way that white supremacy functions in the status quo allows for certain bodies to be devalued, to be taken to these sites and tortured, that this violence is problematic because the suffering allows for these atrocities to just continue. The spectacle of the suffering allows atrocities to continue. We say that your call to humanism and human rights, we justify that because it reifies an other that is not human and a human body that is normative. We say that that's the refutation that that's problematic.